What's up, listeners? It's Andrea. Today, Shereese really doesn't like this one. I love this episode. And we asked the question, there are dolphins aboard the Enterprise? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we're talking Season 5, Episode 21, The Perfect Mate. This episode was written by Renee Echevarria and Gary Perconti, directed by Cliff Bole. Picard serves as a host for a peace treaty between two warring planets, but he may be unable to resist the reconciliation gift, which is a beautiful empathic metamorph who is to be presented by one leader as the other's wife. Famke Janssen is so gorgeous in this episode. Literally so excited to watch this one and review it. I don't remember like a ton of the details like right off the top, but I just remember that there was like kind of like this egg made out of light that's sort of glowing and a person breaks out and she's supposed to be like a perfect mate to whoever she's around. And I thought it was super creative story and I was so excited to jump into it. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't really remember this story. This is one that I usually give a skip because the thing I do remember is that it was some woman being bred as a perfect mate and being treated as property. And I just feel like women being treated as property is such, I want to say an old school way of thinking, but it's not. Like it's still kind of a current way of thinking that should like die a fiery death. So I just felt like, oh, even in the 24th century, women are still treated as property. That doesn't feel very novel to me. So I usually give this one a skip. And in rewatching it, I was not super excited. And I will say, yeah, she was extremely beautiful, but I couldn't really shake that feeling the whole episode because even when they were like, this is outrageous. A woman as property is outrageous. I mean, still they like treat her like that didn't change though. Like nothing changed. All went exactly the same. I don't know. I didn't really understand the point of this episode. So I'm really curious to hear your take on some of these things to see if my opinion changes by the end of our conversation.
Ooh, see this one. Oh my gosh, this is a rare one where we have like differing opinions. Like you and I have different opinions on like Alexander, but not on the episodes as a whole where we're both like, that was trash or we both think it was wonderful. So it's really cool. Like I like this one a lot. The woman bred to be a gift is, yes, it sucks. However, what I thought was really creative about the story is that she's an empathic metamorph. So anyone she's around, she like morphs to be the perfect companion for that person. I think it would have been a little bit cooler if it would have been like male or female. She would just become like the perfect friend or the perfect partner or the perfect cousin or the perfect whatever, right? But it's really just around men. So I was like, maybe just have like a woman be like her escort around, you know, I was going to say campus, but like around the Enterprise.
Around the ship,
like, yeah, around the ship, you know, but like, I loved the idea. Also, I really loved her like hair and makeup and her dress was so beautiful. I was like, oh my God, why can't I wear something like that?
You absolutely can.
I mean, I can't pull it off like Famke Janssen though, let's be honest, which by the way, here's a fun fact. This was only her second acting job. She was a model.
Wow.
And after this episode, was offered to join the main cast for Deep Space Nine. And she turned it down. But they ended up loving like her makeup so much that they used that makeup on Dax in DS9.
Yeah, when I saw her, I was like, that makeup is so beautiful. It looks exactly like Trill. Like the Trill makeup. Although the last Trill we saw did not have makeup quite like this.
Yes.
Looked totally different. But this is beautiful. Like the makeup job and the little spots and the spots that go down her back.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So pretty. So pretty. All right, cool. Well, in an effort to bring centuries of war to an end, these two worlds, Krios and Vault Minor, have agreed to a ceremony of reconciliation aboard the Enterprise. And we kind of start off with the ambassador, the Kriosian ambassador, which I'm like, Krios is a cool planet name. And to be a Kriosian sounds even cooler. The Kriosian ambassador is having this like lovely little tea with Picard in his ready room and asks that the gift that they brought aboard to be kept securely in the cargo bay, which should remain off limits. And Picard was like, for sure. But like, is there anything like illegal or anything? He's like, no, it's just
dangerous or hazardous or something.
Yeah. He's like, no, it's just like irreplaceable
and fragile.
And fragile. Yeah. So maybe, don't And he's like, and so Picard's like, sure, like, listen, like, who am I to get in the middle of this? Like, fine. So the Enterprise very quickly comes across a Ferengi shuttle that's in distress, and we see the classic Star Trek move of like beaming survivors off the shuttle as the explosion ensues, and it's two Ferengis, and they're pretty excited to be aboard, and they're like, perhaps Captain Picard will, or perhaps the captain will like invite us to dine with him. And I love Worf's line where he goes, the captain dines alone, and just like leaves them in their quarters.
Out. Yeah, no one has patience for the Ferengi of any shape or form. This is like even worse than Alexander, basically. People have no patience for the Ferengi. What was interesting when these two guys walked in is I immediately recognized both of them. I was like, hey,
yes,
we've seen them both before as Ferengi or somewhere else. And so I did a little Googling on IMDb. I did. Thanks, IMDb. I always do this. Whenever I see shows and I see an actor I recognize, I go immediately, I pause the show, go to IMDb, find the name of the actor, find the thing they've been in, and then I go all the way back to their original starting career until I find the show I remember them from. Otherwise, it's like
it's going to bother you.
It's like a splinter. And I have to resolve
It's a mind splinter. It's like a mind tickle.
Splinter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to figure it out. So one of these actors, Max Grodenchik, I think is how you say his name, was also the Ferengi in Captain's Holiday. The one who was obsessed with Vosh. That's what
I thought.
Yep,
that's
it was him.
What I thought.
But he's playing a different Ferengi. But it's the same actor and the same makeup, but different name. And he actually goes on to play a Ferengi in Deep Space Nine. So, because they're a lot more prominent. They're a lot more prominent in that story, in that world. Than they are in the other series.
Do we know the actor who plays Quark? Is that the same?
No,
is that the same one? Oh, okay,
it's a different person. Yeah.
Okay.
Although the actor who played Quark was on TNG before, and then comes back as Quark on TNG, and then goes on to DS9 as Quark. Yeah. Also, the guy who plays Neelix was a Ferengi in TNG, and then comes back.
He was.
Yeah. Anyways,
yeah.
The other Ferengi comes back in the episode Rascals, season 6, episode 7, as one of the Ferengi taking over the ship.
Okay.
Again, he's a different Ferengi, different name, but same exact makeup.
I feel like, do they just have like, is there like one of those like old 80s like metal filing cabinets, the kind that screech when you open them? And there's all these different manila files in there that say like Cardassian, Romulans, like Ferengi, and it's just headshots of the same where they're like, let's see, there's only 3 headshots in each file folder in that screeching metal file cabinet.
Potentially, right? Because we do see the actress who plays Kalar comes back like 5 times as different aliens. But the Ferengi, I think they want a certain type. They want a person who's very kind of petite in stature, kind of short, kind of thin. You don't see a ton of overweight Ferengi. I think we see like one, the Grand Nagus, the like ruler of all the Ferengi or whatever. But they're usually like pretty slight, pretty short, pretty skinny. And so they have to have a certain build, kind of like Klingons too, right? They're pretty tall, pretty big, pretty bulky. They have to have a certain build. So I think that's why they just keep reusing the Ferengi. And because the Ferengi have full face makeup, they can just play Ferengi all day long. You would never know it was the same person.
You kind of can't tell. Could you imagine mixing up those file folders though, and calling in a Ferengi or calling in like a Klingon? Yeah, or having like a Ferengi play like a Klingon. He's like 5'2", and they're like, you're either a young one or like, something went wrong.
Basically, it's Alexander.
Yeah. Which, anyway, thank God at least he's not in this one. Anyway, so the Ferengi though were like, oh, that was too easy. So we're like, so they're clearly kind of up to something. Now, we find out when we come back from the intro that Geordi's been working to make a holodeck replica of the Kryosian temple where the peace ceremony will take place. And the ambassador is like, oh, this looks pretty good. Okay, like, we're sort of, there's still some stuff to add, but overall it's looking good. And now one of the Ferengis are loose. And they like sneak into like the egg, the cargo bay with the egg. Yeah. And he's like, ooh, what's that? And it's like, why didn't you guys have a guard posted at the door? Thought it was supposed to be secured or locked.
Yeah, they don't lock doors. I think what secured meant was they told people don't go in there. And then because they're all, the crew, they're just like, okay. Right? Like they just listened. They just said this is out of bounds. And they're like, okay. But before that, we find out in the temple, like in this holodeck program, the ambassador lets us know the history between the war between these two people. So apparently these two kingdoms used to be led by 2 brothers. So they were in harmony. And one brother was in love with this woman, and the other brother stole the woman. And that caused war for centuries and centuries and centuries. So it's very symbolic for them to have this reuniting ceremony in this temple. And as we find out later that the gift is a woman, it's kind of like undoing what caused all the war. So I think this is supposed to tie up the whole storyline in a nice little bow.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. I remember that in passing, but I was like, man, okay, whatever. So these Ferengis now get loose, and one of them decides to kind of run over to go check out what's in the cargo bay. And the other one hides around the corner from the holodeck. And when like Picard and Geordi and the ambassador come out, he does what I think is possibly the most irritating sound ever recorded in the galaxy, where he goes, excuse me. And I was like, ugh. Please don't ever come up on somebody like that. Like, don't come up on someone like that. But he tries like striking up a trade deal with the ambassador, who Picard is like, the ambassador is very busy. Like, you might have to like meet with him another time. Like, we don't have time for this. And Geordi very diplomatically turns him away. And did you hear what Geordi said to the guy when he tried to like shoo the Ferengi away?
No, what did he say?
He said, have you had the opportunity to see the dolphins yet? And I went, there are dolphins aboard the Enterprise?
That is really cool.
I was like, wait a second. And
why don't we ever see them?
A holodeck. But he goes, have you had the opportunity to see the dolphins yet? And I was like, pause, everybody pause. There's fucking dolphins aboard the Enterprise. Like,
who cares about what's in cargo bay too?
Who gives a shit? There's dolphins aboard. Oh my God. I like, as a marine biologist, I was like, okay, well, I know where I'm going to be all of the time.
Looking at space dolphins, 100%.
100%. Now, the other Ferengi who's in the cargo bay is scanning the glowing egg, and the Ferengi gets busted by Worf, but like he has kind of piled up a bunch of like cargo bins to sort of stand up higher to be able to scan this egg. And as Worf is like, hey, you, like he sort of stumbles and falls down, and one of the barrels like kind of knocks one of the legs off the tripod. That this thing is sort of floating on like a tripod of like tractor beams kind of. And so it knocks one of the legs off. And so the whole egg tips over and starts to break apart. And there's a woman inside. And she comes up to Picard and she says, I am for you, Ulrika Volt. And I was like, uh-oh. Now we have a problem. And I would love to know your thoughts on A, all of this, but B, also traveling in an egg.
Yeah, I mean,
cargo bay.
I mean, I don't mind the traveling in an egg because she's in stasis. So whatever shape the stasis takes, whatever. And they kept her in stasis because her libido is so high and her pheromones are so strong that they just didn't want anybody to be kind of taken in by her feminine wiles. So I guess that makes sense that they were trying to contain it. I do think it was silly for them to not have a guard on the door if that was such an important thing and no one could go in there. But also we've discussed before that the security on the Enterprise is a little lax and stuff like this happens, right? This is another retraining. More like
the security team on the Cerritos. It's like, this feels way more like what you would expect. Just slip ups left and right. Also, when you have Ferengi aboard, like you just rescued them, so you have no idea that they have like a plan. But like, okay, they appear that you just rescued them, but knowing your history with the Ferengi, I wouldn't go so far as to like throw them in the brig until we can get them delivered to somewhere else. I'd be like, well, you're of course our guest, but I'd also be like, Mr. Worf, I'd like you to have like a team of people kind of just like staying within the hallway of their quarters. So if they go scamping around, like somebody kind of has eyes on what they're doing.
I feel a little uncomfortable with that idea just because as a Black woman, I get treated like that when I go into stores sometimes. But I understand that they do seem a little, their history with them is negative, but I wouldn't follow them around because as far as the Enterprise knows, they're not up to anything fishy. We know that as the audience, but they just seem like they were rescued from a legit explosion. If the Enterprise hadn't come along, I feel like they would have died. So this was a really dumb plan, but
it was
somehow
a really risky gamble.
It was really risky. Like they could have died 1 second later, right? So it was a really dumb plan, but it worked. And I wouldn't think that they were up to anything. I would definitely want them to be in sick bay to be checked out because they were just in an explosion and stuff. But I probably wouldn't put guards on them or anything else. But I would have a guard outside of the door if this cargo is so precious and is going to be the single key determination in ending a war. Throw a guard on the door. That's lasted
hundreds of years.
Throw a guard on that door. Like I think that's very reasonable. And I would say locks, but we know they don't use locks. But at the very least, have a human standing there being like, no, keep walking, buddy. But they didn't do that. So at this point, when the woman kind of unfolds and she's like, I am for you. I just kind of, had this gag reflex. It just bothers me. It just bothers me, this whole idea of a woman being given to another person as property. It's actually part of our marriage ceremonies here in America, where women are given away from the father to their husband. So from man to man, this property is passed. And, women used to come with a dowry, or like, here's a little, some money or whatever to come with this woman so you can take her. And it just feels,
not only is she given away, she's like sold. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't feel empowering. It doesn't make me as a woman feel good about being a woman. It makes me feel bad. So I was like, okay, maybe they're going to like address it or something. And so we find out that in this culture, this is the thing I did think was interesting. We find out that in their culture, there are empathic metamorphs where they know exactly how to please their partner. And the males, many, many, many males are metamorphs. It is like extremely common. Yeah. But a female metamorph is only born once a generation. So I thought, okay, if I was in a culture where every single, like just translating that to our American culture, if every single man knew exactly how to please their partner, this would be a really radical world. It'd be so different than how I look at.
Sign me up for that.
Right. Than how I look at, like, our culture now feels very one-sided when it comes to like sexual pleasure specifically. It feels very one-sided. It feels like it's all about, men getting pleasure and women being a plaything. But this idea of the men being the ones who are like just being able to pleasure a woman in any way they want sounds like it sounds really interesting. And then to have a woman as a metamorph once in every generation, like I kind of feel like
7 generations, I think they said. So it's like even rarer than that.
Yeah, I feel like that. Do we need that? Like, if all the men are already metamorphs, do we even need the female metamorph? Like, my thinking was if I had a male metamorph and a female metamorph who met, they would be like canceling each other out because they would have no preferences of their own. So I don't understand why this female metamorph would be so special, because all the males or almost all the males are metamorphs.
I think it's special because of the historical significance of what started the war between Krios and the Vault. So that's my only thing where I'm like, a woman was stolen, in air quotes, stolen, right? Like, yeah, 2 brothers like fought over the love of this one woman. So like, we can bring a really spectacular woman to be like, the symbolic like gift, and like a very like physical gift as well, like for this other ambassador. And that's like, that kind of like puts a neat little bow on like the end of their history. And that's how the war was ended. Yeah. So I understand.
In that sense, it's very interesting. Yeah. But just thinking of their culture, I was like, I don't know what, like, other than that, like that makes a lot of sense. But other than that, I was kind of like, I don't really get it. And then I also was like, but that's not our culture. So I want them to bring in more of the fact that the males are metamorphs, and it's very common. And it's like, I wanted that more in this episode, because I just felt like out of that context, we just basically have this woman who's super sexy and is basically a prostitute, right? A prostitute who can read the man who she's with and serve him and please him sexually in any way he wants. And I'm not knocking prostitutes, because that's a hard freaking job that I wouldn't want to do. Because obviously she'd be super high end, like very expensive woman who can like change herself. But I also feel like the message of our culture is a little bit like women should change themselves so that men want them. So again, with this episode, I just was like, this feels very reinforcing to negative stereotypes that my whole life have made me feel so uncomfortable, so less than, so out of step. So I just really, this whole scene, I was like, okay, maybe they're going to turn it around. And then I just don't think they did.
See, it's so interesting. It's so interesting that both of us have like such different experiences, like with the scene where I was like, what a cool idea, because I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like, I'm going to sexually please you. She was like, I'm just going to become the perfect mate, like for life. So, but that's eventually, she said, but now I'm going to become whatever any man wants until I get to that point, and I'm going to enjoy it. So good for her. Because like that conversation she had with Riker is like, every man I meet, I'm just going to like hook up with him basically. And then when I find the final one, then I like lock in their preferences. See, I just thought like when she was talking to Picard at some point in the episode where she had mentioned, she's like, I would be strong, I would be brilliant, I would be adventurous, I would be all of these things, because that is like what you most want in a mate, or that's like who you are. Like I'm mirroring you basically. which I'm like, that doesn't always work out very well, because I have been in relationships with people where we're so similar that we're way too similar.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it just sort of feels like
There's
you're dating yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay. So like, obviously those relationships ended very quickly because it was like, well, we're just way too similar. Like there's just way too, we are exactly the same. And what you need is sometimes two sides of a coin instead of two of the same sides of a coin. But at any rate, yeah. So I see why you feel that way. I mean, Beverly is very much on your side. She's incredibly unhappy with the whole women being born and bred as a gift for a man kind of thing. And I see where she's coming from with that. And of course, Picard gives her the prime suggestion as a reason that they can't interfere. So he's like,
you cannot stand on that leg, Picard.
Like he is like, I love how he, playing a Frenchman, tears up a croissant and throws it on his plate and goes, so we just tear up the prime directive? And I was like, I see what you're doing. You're tearing up a croissant as well, like a lovely breakfast pastry, which, by the way, I have attempted to make croissants and they are incredibly difficult to make. And they take like 3 days from start to finish. And I'm like, I think I'll just go down to the bakery and just buy one. So it broke my heart a little bit to see him tear one up. I was like, no, that was so much work. Oh God. Picard does come to visit Kamala to see if she is comfortable. And did you notice the wonderful way that this scene was set up? Picard walked in, so we get a full frontal shot of Picard walking in from the hallway, but there's a mirror like adjacent to the door, so we only see Picard face on, but Kamala's speaking to him, but out of direct shot of the camera, we only see her reflection like talking to him. So it seems like they're both facing the camera and they're talking to each other, but it's her reflection. And I was like, wow, I really love that like Cliff Bold took that scene in that direction. It just stood out to me as like, I don't know if I've ever really noticed a scene like this before where someone is talking to the camera and the person they're speaking to is also looking at the camera, but like through a mirror. So I'm like, oh, that's pretty, I don't know. It just jumped out to me.
I didn't notice that at all. It sounds amazing.
It was really cool. You know, and you know, Picard and Kamala have this little conversation and she's like, have you been alone your whole life? And he's like, don't try to get inside my head. Just don't, you know, he's kind of unnerved by her. And she's like, you know, I'm sorry, but this is like who I am. Like, this is who I am. And she's at the end of her finis raw. That's the height of her like sexual maturity stage. And every man would fight over her. So Data is assigned to chaperone her around the ship. And I actually really like this scene where like Data takes her to 10 forward and she kind of like roughs it up with the miners, and in front of Worf she sort of growls and she whatever, and Riker already made out with her at this point. So he sees her coming and he's like, I'll see you later, Worf, and just kind of knows what's good for him and just walks out. He's like, I'm just gonna go ahead and go now. And
it was in that conversation with Riker where she mentions that she's gonna hook up with every guy basically she can because that's fun. And Riker's kind of like, I know, right? But he's like, oh, wait, I mean, no, what I meant to say was professionalism. And it was like, yeah, you can't stand on that like leg, Riker. It's like, Picard and Riker, you guys are not remembering your history accurately in this episode.
What I do like when Riker decides to pull the professionalism card and he walks out and he's basically like, have a good night. He walks out of her room, kind of wipes his mouth where they were just making out. And he goes, Riker to bridge, if you need me, I'll be in holodeck 4. And I was like, Riker, what are you about to get into on holodeck 4?
I thought the same thing. I was like, do you need a holodeck? Do you mean your quarters? I don't know if you need the whole holodeck for, okay, well, anyways, for whatever you're planning to do, buddy.
That's a door that needs locking because a kid is going to be like, dum-de-dum-dum, like,
well, you know what it's going to be? It's going to be Troy. Like, hey guys, what's going on? Or it's going to be freaking O'Brien. Like, hey, haven't seen you in a while. Just thought I'd walk into your private holodeck time.
Get out.
Yeah. So I was also wondering, like, Data really 10 forward of all places when her pheromonal levels are like through the roof. Maybe take her like anywhere else, like just not 10 forward. But whatever, she has a great time. How
about like the astrometrics lab? There's gonna be like 2 people in there,
or the Arponics Bay, or so many other places. But
yeah,
whatever.
The gift shop. We haven't seen the gift shop since Data's day.
The salon. Let's go talk to Mott. Like, there's so many places. But we go to.
Have you seen flowers at the Arboretum? Let's go. There's nobody but Keiko, and she's happily married. Like, surprisingly to everyone, she's still happily married. So like, why don't we go there? Oh my gosh!
But in any case, we get this scene, and very quickly, Picard realizes everything the ambassador said about you can't let her out of her quarters.
Deck 10. I'm just saying, sorry. I'm just like, how about Transporter Bay 17? Nobody ever goes there.
Let's go back to that cargo bay we were at, where your egg was. Let's see what it looks like now. So many places. I'm just
thinking, like, God, there's the water filtration pump system, the Jeffries tubes. Have you seen a warp core before?
Let's go have a sculpture. Let's go just make a sculpture. Like, we could go do that in the art lab. Like, we could just go. There's so many places. But you go straight to 10 forward with this pheromonal bombshell.
Yeah.
It's about to turn everything into the Wild West here.
Yeah.
Anyways, which is also another thing that I feel like that trope of, like, we go to war over a beautiful woman. I'm going to get in a bar fight over a beautiful woman. I feel like it's supposed to be like, it's supposed to be honoring women or something.
I was going to say, is it supposed to be a compliment? Because I feel like it's really stupid.
Compliment. I feel like it's supposed to be a compliment. I don't get it though. So, like, if a guy did that for me, I'd be like, I don't get it. Like, there, if a guy was like, I'm going to show you how much I care for you by getting in a fist fight with this guy over you, I would be very confused. Like, I don't understand how that translates to I'm special. So, anyways, it's weird. I don't know.
But I do think there are a lot of women who love the idea of men fighting over them because it puts them on a pedestal of being like this like
treasure or something.
This treasure, yeah, that like men would fight over. However, the idea, like, it might sound like, oh, cool, like in a fairy tale, I guess, to some women. But if you think about that being applied in the real world, like, fist fights are ugly things. Mm-hmm. They're really ugly and nasty and
scary.
And it's very scary because violence, like, it's very unpredictable and things move very fast. And before you know it, somebody's missing a tooth or an eye or has hit the ground and died. Like, it's a very scary thing. So if somebody actually started a fight with me or started a fight over me, I'd just go ahead and collect my things and grab an Uber and go home alone. I'd be like, neither one of you ever call me again.
Yeah.
If this is the kind of person you are, like, I don't ever want.
It's very scary and unnerving. It does not make me feel safe or protected. No. So yeah, anyways, so we have this kind of sweet connection with Data, and then we quickly have Picard talking to the ambassador. Basically, the ambassador saying, I told you so, because I literally told you so. And Picard's like, no, I think it'll be fine. And so then Picard is like, all right, I guess it's not fine. So then he talks to Kamala and is like, well, so, like, you remember how I said you're free to go anywhere? Turns out, maybe not, because exactly like the ambassador said, all these guys are going crazy over you and they can't do their jobs. And then he actually says, well, I think for the Starfleet crew, they'll be fine. They'll be able to obey orders. And I'm like, these two, get out of here, Picard. Like, if pheromones are taking over your body, you might not obey orders. Let's just put it like that. So like, they'll be okay, but we've got guests on board, and that's really why, or whatever. And so Kamala's like, all right, you know what? I will volunteer to stay in my quarters, which was the deal in the first place when the egg got loose, but okay. I will volunteer to stay in my quarters if only you promise to visit me. And then basically Picard's kind of like, why? And he asked her later, why do you keep, like, pushing and trying to seduce me, basically? Mentally and emotionally, not really physically. She's not getting naked in front of him, but like, she's definitely emotionally trying to seduce him. And he's like, why do you keep trying to do that? And she says, because you want me to. That's the only reason. Everything I do is because the person I'm with wants me to. So he agrees. So she stays.
I mean, yes, I understand what she's saying because she's an empath. So she's not guessing he wants her to. She knows for sure that he wants her to. Right. And it's like Picard is not immune to, like, this beautiful woman who has like a million things in common with him.
Who's his perfect mate,
seems, right?
Like, who's the perfect woman,
mate, right? Who's the perfect woman for him, right? So he obviously has a strong sense of duty, but he still, like, can't help himself but be very strongly attracted to this woman and drawn to her. So she's like, there's only one possible reason why I do keep pushing for this, because you want me to. Like, she consents it. So yeah, there's, he stays. Like, I mean, kind of like summing up kind of this whole episode, like, the Ferengi end up cooking up a deal, or trying to cook up a deal with the ambassador. Yeah, where he's like, they're like,
they knew about this egg.
Somehow, how is beyond me, but okay, whatever. Let's just assume that they're a competent race and they got this figured out, right? So, the Ferengi are like, hey, we really, really want Kamala. Like, she would be invaluable, a trading commodity. We can give you all this money. We can bribe you with all this shit. Like, a shuttle will be here in 2 hours to like come get all of us.
Rendezvous with us, and we can all run off into the sunset.
Yes. And I gotta say, the Kryozanian ambassador isn't that smart, because he goes, thank you for that information. I'm gonna go tell Picard that right now. And I was like, dude, just play it
just
cool
agree and play along, and then walk out.
And play along. And when you walk out, then go to a hallway panel right outside the door and be like, hey, Picard, this is the conversation I just had. But of course, he didn't. So the Ferengi tackle him, and he ends up falling down on a glass table and breaking it and becoming like totally taken out of commission. Like, he's been unconscious for days.
Unconscious, which is like really scary, because he's super old. We find out later he's 200 years old. But even at the age the actor really is, which is probably like, I don't know, 70 or something, 60, 70. You're like, that's not good. I mean, for any age, for you to fall on your head onto a glass table is not good. But especially when you're older and your bones are less, strong and stuff. I was actually worried for the actor, like I was like, or the stunt man or whatever. I was just like, ooh, that didn't. I know it's not real glass, but ow, like that still looks like that really hurt.
Sugar. It's like that sugar thing that looks like it's
the sugar
sugar that looks like glass. Yeah, sugar glass. But even still, it's like, dear God. But like, Beverly's able to stabilize him, but he's going to be unconscious for a few days. And Kamala's like, the conference can't be postponed.
And it happens like tomorrow at this point.
Yes. And like, I'm in the very final stages of this like sexual maturity, and I have to bond with Ulrich Volt in the next 2 days. So there's like, otherwise I've missed my window. And I was like, damn, you guys didn't have a B plan or anything in case shit went wrong? You're in space. You didn't think anything could go wrong? Okay, whatever.
That's a really good point.
Like,
why did they wait to the very last stage of her thing? Why didn't they do it like a year earlier? And she could still be kind of like saucy, but she would just have to be confined to the palace, which she already was on her home world. So whatever.
To be fair to the plot, she did say, had I remained in stasis in my little glowing egg, there could have been some room for error. But because I was brought out of stasis early, you're right. Now it is too late. So it's like, but even still, you're right. Like, how about a year before?
Right.
A year before.
Right.
How about not like a day before?
Not like, 2 weeks before, and it's a 2-week journey. Like, that is cutting it very close.
That's extremely, And then what happens if the window closes? Then what? Then what do you do? So Picard is the only person who's familiar enough, surprise, surprise, with the peace treaty, that Kamala's like, I'm very knowledgeable in the culture of Vault and will assist you in the ceremony, but you need to be the point person on this now, because apparently
new temporary ambassador. Why not?
By the way, you don't have like an understudy ambassador, also like just one ambassador and one egg. Dear God.
I thought the same thing. And I was like, Picard's great at being an ambassador. And like he said, I can't represent the desires of your people. Like, I can't represent you guys accurately. I don't know what this ambassador had in mind that he wanted to fight for, the negotiations he wanted to make. And I was like, maybe you need to phone a friend. We need to hop on a Zoom call, get the other ambassadors up on here, put them on screen, and have them do the ceremony or whatever. You can ring the bells, but we need someone from that world.
He said, you can ring the bells.
Sure. You can knock the xylophone in space. You can do all the, gong, do all the ceremonies. But the actual negotiation should happen with representatives from that planet and this other planet. Like, Picard should not be stepping in as some last second, 10 hours before the negotiation. Tell me all the things you want me to negotiate for. Like, this is crazy. But whatever. Everybody's cool with it. The planet's cool with it. They just gave him carte blanche to like, you know us pretty well, Picard. You probably know what we want. You just negotiate this peace treaty for this 300-year-long war we've been having. And all will be well. So that's what they decide, and I guess it's all fine.
She ends up working with him, and like, they do the xylophone training and a whole bunch of stuff. And, they do end up bonding further, because he talks about, how he took piano as a kid and she took musical instruments, and he's like, oh, which one do you play? And she's like, all of them, because she has to be well-versed in like everything of everything possible, because you never know when you might have a mate that needs you to also be a brain surgeon. Who knows, right?
Yep.
So, the
or
evening
expertly play the xylophone. Yes, whatever it may be.
Space xylophone. So the night before the ceremony, Chancellor Ulrich beams aboard. He's solely concerned with the provisions of the peace agreement. He is not concerned at all about Kamala. He's like a little weaselly kind of like just sort of very unlikable man.
Yeah, he doesn't care about the ceremony
shit.
either. So that was also a waste of time learning, because he was like, these people are so ceremonial. Like he knows the other planet cared about ceremony and gifts and yada yada.
Yeah.
He's like, all I care about is the trade agreement.
Yeah.
That's all I care about.
Mm-hmm. That's it. So Picard's like, dang it. Like my perfect mate is going to be stuck with this like little mushroom of a human being who's like, meh, 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 about stuff. Right. So Kamala is afraid to be alone on the eve of her bonding with Ulrich, and Picard agrees to stay and talk with her, and their connection grows even deeper. And she does the like stroking his hair thing, but he doesn't really have any, so she just kind of strokes his head.
Gives him a little scalp massage.
Yeah, and she is super falling for him, and he knows he should leave, and you know, he's got to go have tea with Beverly the next morning. And it is the moment I have been waiting for since we started this podcast. They have the tea pot and cups that all form together to make one set. Did you notice it?
No,
it's called the Sanger Porcelain Design 2 set. I have a picture of it up now on our Instagram, so go check it out. Sanger is spelled Saenger. It's like a very, very like architecturally sculptural like teapot set. It too can be yours for $400. Now, it's beautiful and it's handmade, so I'm not taking a dig at the price. And I will tell you, as an amateur ceramicist myself, it is an incredibly complicated design to like, I'm pretty sure it's hand built. You can't make that on a wheel. And like all the cups and the pot all form together to make like one shape. So It's like to make everything fit together. It's like, I wish I could own one. Like I wish I had $400 spare to just buy myself a Sanger Porcelain Design 2 set. But like, okay. But he's having this tea with Beverly and he's like, I'm so drawn to Kamala, and Beverly is such a shoulder for him. And I was like, I think that's really sweet, because she's like, I wish I knew how to help you, buddy. Like,
I kind of felt like, yes, this was sweet. And I kind of felt like, wow, Beverly, this is the least helpful you've ever been. I feel like this is the first time she hasn't given her opinion or her advice in the history of the show. I was like, you've always got something to share. You've always got some idea. You've always got
she does
something. But here she goes, wish there was something I could say. And then takes a sip of her tea.
What could she say? It's like,
I don't know. Something Beverly says. Something she pulls out of the air where you're like, yeah,
this
Beverly,
is a problem with no solution. This is a classic science experiment with no solution. There is nothing you can do. You let her go and you hurt. What are you going to marry her? That's not a thing.
Yeah.
Prime suggestion, anybody? That's not going to be allowed to happen. Right. So it's like, and I love that she was like, I wish I knew what to do to help. And he's like, I just needed a shoulder. And a lot of times that's what people need.
Yeah.
And I have found that helpful in some past relationships where my partner's having a bad day at work or I'm having a bad day. And the question is asked, like, do you want a shoulder or do you want solutions? Right. And most of the time I know which one I want, where I'm like, I don't want you to fix this for me. I just need you to listen that I'm like having a bad day at work or whatever. So she is a shoulder for him. And I think that's like such a wonderful friendship. And she says like, you've always had a shoulder with me. And I was like, why don't you two just get married already? God.
They're very sweet. I do really like the take on relationships in this TNG universe where it's very open, like where you could love someone, but also be with somebody else. And it's not weird and it doesn't make everybody jealous and angry. I don't really get that because I would be jealous and angry. So I don't understand it. But I do think it's beautiful to watch where people can really honestly be happy for someone else because they're happy.
That's why I feel like things like open relationships or polyamory or whatever, I feel like on paper they sound really great, where it's like we as humans have the capacity to like love a bunch of other humans, and it doesn't all have to be like in linear, chronological time. Like it could be kind of at once. And I found this person A, I have these bonds with, and person B, I have these other bonds with. But I also feel like it sort of inevitably doesn't work for the most part. I'm sure there are some people out there who are like, I've been in an open relationship for like 20 years. It works for us, but it's like, I feel
they might
like
be an exception to the rule. I don't know.
I think they are the exception.
I'm not super versed in that world, but I know me personally, I don't like to share. So I just already know it's not for me, but I do say similar to you. Like, I appreciate the people who can live that lifestyle because like you said, it makes so much sense on paper. And I don't like being jealous and angry. Like I don't enjoy those feelings. So my solution is to not share. So then I don't have those feelings, but there are other solutions, right? So I agree that like, I think it's on paper, it's like a really cool idea. In practice, I couldn't practice it. I already know. We already know I'm not.
Our world is full of things that sound great on paper and are a complete disaster in practice. So it's like, okay, whatever. Anyway, now it's the ceremony time and Picard comes to pick her up. She's in the ceremonial gown and it is pretty, but like it's a way more stiff look. I liked her other look better. And she reveals that she has bonded with Picard and she will be this way forever. But having bonded with him, she's learned the meaning of the word duty and she will carry out like her duty to bring peace to these two worlds. And as she walks out, she only hopes, she says, I only hope he likes Shakespeare. And I was like, oh, Kamala, you poor thing. You poor thing. And he like walks her down the aisle and Picard is like pretty wretched watching them kiss. And I was like, oh, this is just not.
Yeah, it's sad for everybody. It's sad because Picard has now, lost the literal woman of his dreams. But also, here we have a woman marrying someone else because she feels like she has to and living a life of quiet misery, which I feel like is something a lot of women can relate to. So again, yes. I didn't feel like this transported me. A lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people for sure. But just being a woman, I have like a very limited scope of experience. And I feel like, and I know there's a lot of people in unhappy marriages, but I feel like a lot of women historically going along with this theme of women being property and whatnot have been in marriages, especially something like this, a political marriage, have been in marriages so that family treaties could be formed, et cetera, but has nothing to do with actually loving that person. And granted, the husband is also getting into this marriage with some random person, but culturally, a lot of times the husband has a whole bunch of concubines, whole bunch of mistresses, somebody they love like hanging in the back.
A lot more agency to do so.
Right. Like they have a harem of women that they can pick any time, but women culturally didn't have the same thing. Like if they got married politically, they didn't have a harem of men that they could go and hang out with, right? That would be like somehow wrong, but cool for the guy. Yes. So it's like really, it's this feeling of being trapped in a relationship because you're a woman. That's how I felt at the end. And I did feel sorry for Picard because that was really sad. But I also feel like Kamala, your whole entire life now is going to be dedicated to a man you don't love and could never love. And you're going to have to try to please him when he could care less about you. And you're just trapped in this thing for the rest of your life until you die. So heartbreaking.
Interested in her. Seems like most likely he'll just leave her alone most of the time.
Right.
Which is like, cool. Okay. At least.
But the whole time she'll be in love with Picard. So it's like she will be pining for the rest of her life is what she signed herself up for. But yeah, you're right. At least he'll leave her alone. She won't be having to like service him all the time because he's going to be off doing his thing.
There's no mechanism for her to refuse at this point anyway. There was a proposed ending where Kamala stopped the ceremony herself and chose to like kind of go off on her own instead of choosing Ulrich or Picard. Because like, she's not going to live aboard the Enterprise now.
Right.
But they ended up nixing that. And then there was a second alternate ending proposed, one where Picard stops the ceremony, but it's revealed that it's like just in his imagination. Cause like he would never do that. Like his sense of duty is too great. And it's like,
that would be so much worse. Cause you're like, yay. And then you'd be like, and it's just his imagination. You'd be like, what the? Yeah, that would be so much more, even more upsetting as a viewer.
Yeah.
Anyway, glad they didn't go with either of those.
That's kind of where things end. In departing, the ambassador is like, I was chosen for this role for one reason alone, because I'm 200 years old. So like this woman's sexual like maturity pheromones probably wouldn't do much to like sway me in either way, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't tempted at all. And you spent like days and days with her. How were you able to resist her? And Captain replies, have a safe trip home. And I was like, dang. Yeah. Okay. Which tells me
the ambassador just gets on the pad and zooms away.
I wonder if when she said, I'm afraid to be alone tonight, and he stays, I wonder if they did hook up, because that answer is like, have a safe trip home. That to me, that could read, it's none of your business, but it can also like on a more deep level can read, I didn't resist her. Like,
well, I just read it as
something went down.
I do wonder if they hooked up, but I didn't assume they hooked up. I just assumed he fell in love with her, like just without any hooking up. And so that was his answer of like, how did you resist her? I didn't. I fell in love with her. Yeah. Through all of my resisting, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Is what I took it to mean.
Yeah. Anyway, final thoughts on this one? I mean, I feel like we know your thoughts.
My final thoughts are I didn't love it. I did not understand what my take-home message was supposed to be at the end of this episode. The end. What were your final thoughts?
I enjoyed the episode because I loved watching Famke Janssen's acting change between people, where I was like, that's pretty cool. That's versatile for an actress. I thought the plot was creative. I didn't think of it too much as like this woman is property, or like women are bred to please men, because she's the first one in 100 years that was born on the planet like this. So my take was, if women were born and bred to please men, then it wouldn't be so special that she's the only one. Like, there would be millions of them. No,
just she was born and bred to please men, specifically. I mean, not born and bred. She was born, and then when she was 4, she was taking from her mom, so she could be bred, to do this, so she could be trained. So
yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think it's interesting that we have an episode that like we had different feelings on, because I think that might be a first. But on that note, next week, guys, we are breaking down season 5, episode 22, Imaginary Friend. Thank you so much for nerding out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.